WNST, Towson, Baltimore, ho-ho Festivus hat. I think I have a picture somewhere of me wearing this hat, probably on the lap of Phil Savage and his dad, Big Sav, at the Super Bowl down in Tampa. I can't believe these years slip away. It'll be 17 years next month for Phil Savage and I since that fateful night under the stars of Tampa. We welcome Senior Bowl Phil back on now. He is in a life of not retirement at all as a pundit, speaker, Alabama host, Senior Bowl. What do you take a day off, Phil? Is there a day in the 365 that the scout in you doesn't come out and you doing something football related?
Very rarely, I guess. After the draft and that month of May and month of June, it certainly slows down some. But I've stayed pretty busy over the years. It's always good to be on with you. And yeah, we're in the midst of our preparations for the 69th annual Reese's Senior Bowl and counting down the days not only to Christmas but this playoff game between Alabama and Clemson down in New Orleans on New Year's Day night.
Well, and I know that that's near and dear to your heart, but I want to plug the Reese's Senior Bowl in the hopes that I do get some dark chocolate this year because I prefer that over the milk chocolate. I ran into Chisholm O'Para in Cleveland on Sunday, and obviously your name came up. I think the last time we saw each other was literally in the ballroom there. I believe it's a Renaissance. Is that correct? The hotel there?
Correct.
And
yeah.
I ran into Chisholm there, and he's still working for the Browns, and he has survived many, many administrations there. But, the reason I brought you on, Phil, this week, and look, I want to talk Bama with you, certainly want to talk Senior Bowl and all that stuff, is just where we've been here 22 years into this thing with so many empty seats now, an 8-6 football team that hasn't been pretty this year, and all the problems with the knee and the fallout that have been, really significant here. But going back to your time and the decisions that were made when Lawrence Phillips wasn't brought here, when Ray Lewis wound up in an orange jumpsuit and Jamal Lewis and the Ray Rice fiasco around here, the price of tickets and how fun it is to stay at home in red zone and sit in your own man cave and watch the games on a big screen TV now, and just everything about the experience. And I know you're in football stadiums every week, and have been your whole life watching football games. Some people have really sort of soured on the thing, and I don't know where the Ravens go from here, but I do know this. I don't think there's anything on the field that was promised when you got off the boat here in 1996, that over 22 years, that if you bought tickets and you went to the games and you support the team, that you would say that the team hasn't delivered what is promised, which is an honest effort to get good football players and to try to win all the time.
Yeah, I would say that the situation in Baltimore is certainly not unique. I think that the landscape of sports in general, while there's been a lot of focus on the amount of money that's at stake, it seems to just be a never-ending rainbow, so to speak. There's been some things that have happened this year with injuries across the NFL, with the national anthem situation that has been interpreted a lot of different ways and spun in a lot of different directions. And it's caused, and then the on-the-field product in terms of some of the things that have actually happened on the field in terms of the quality of play, and then obviously some of the antics that have taken place that go beyond the rules of the game. But nevertheless, the Ravens have been a very consistent organization over the years. I think much of that largely goes to the leadership of Ozzie Newsome. I think he's not only a football man, but he's somebody with a lot of common sense, and he's been in that role for a long time. And there's always been differing opinions behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, he carried the biggest voice when push came to shove. In the draft room, I think from an organizational standpoint, you go back to the days of Art Modell when he was the owner, and now Steve Bisciotti is the owner. I think both recognize that when it comes to football, let's lean on Ozzie and the staff the most. They've been here, they've done that, they know what they're doing, and it's just honestly I don't know what the expectations were for the Ravens locally, but In my estimation, I thought they would be about where they are, a winning team, perhaps with a chance to get in the playoffs, but I just wasn't sure, how far they would go if, in fact, they made it.
Senior Bowl Phil can be found out on Twitter and, of course, anywhere Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are served down there in Mobile, Alabama. They'll have the Senior Bowl, and, of course, Phil was our college scouting director here during some glorious periods of time. And, where they are right now at 8-6 with the lighter schedule, and to your point, it has not been a pretty brand of football, right? I mean, there hasn't been much to rally behind here offensively the last couple of weeks this thing's come together. I think from a football perspective, to get away from the ghost of the past, the present, which I've been writing about this week up at the website and taking on sort of all comers, is, the Colts are coming in this week looking direct the Ravens season, and from an emotional standpoint, it's still the Colts, but from a realistic standpoint here, this has been as nice of a draw. And if you lose to Jacoby Brissett or you lose to Marvin next weekend, after they look like they rolled over this past weekend, that if that's the reason you're not playing football in January, that's going to be a really bitter pill to swallow around here, because I think people are kind of bought in that the team's trending the right way, playing well, the offense has been better, and more than that, the veteran guys, Flacco, Woodhead, Wallace, Suggs, Weddle, all of those guys are relatively healthy and playing at a good value for being 30-something-year-old guys, which would have been the kind of guys you would want on your football team, Phil.
Yeah, I would say that with the remaining schedule, I'm sure the expectation is that, hey, we're going to win these last two games, we're going to get to 10-6, and we're going to be in the playoffs, and with a veteran team that knows how to win and what it takes to win in the playoffs, that would almost be a separate season. You're getting a chance to push the reset button and almost start over. So, one of the dangers of having older players is that by the time you get to the end of the year, they're out of gas. That does not seem to be the case here in this situation. I've always felt like that, the Ravens' MO has been top-flight defense and then the ability to run the ball. And I think if the Ravens can commit themselves at least to an extent and stay connected to the run game, that always helps Joe Flacco. I don't know what his record is as a starter when he throws over 40 or more passes, but I would bet, if you did the research, that when he's under 40, the Ravens' chances of winning are at a much higher percentage than when they throw the ball more than 40 times in a game.
Well, it's also nice to take the football away, right? And that's one of those sort of knacks or knocks on a football team that those that take it away kind of consistently do it, right? I mean, and those that don't almost never do. And for whatever reason, this team has been frisky in that way and certainly can get after you with the pass rush and have guys that can sniff the ball at. And they also get their hands up in the throwing lanes a lot to get tip balls. And they're good at that, and they're good at strip sacking. From that perspective, it changes everything. You could be kind of a mediocre defense and you take the ball away enough, you look like even a better defense. This defense was mediocre at different points, certainly without Brandon Williams against the run, but the last couple of weeks they've also ramped up their ability to go get the football.
Well, I'm sure that it's a point of emphasis because in this era of football, it's hard to just shut people down. The rules are slanted toward the offense. It's an offensive-oriented event, so to speak. That's the way that the league wants it. That's what the television networks want, is more scoring. And so, to survive in the NFL defensively, it's all about red zone stops, forcing field goals, and then creating those turnovers. And, when you have a guy like Terrell Suggs that sort of leads the charge, sets the table, who's been a ball-hawking sack artist since his days at Arizona State, that really does set an example for everyone else. And, C.J. Mosley, had a chance to watch him all 4 of his seasons at Alabama. He's another guy that's got the speed, the athleticism to get to the football at that intermediate level. And then, of course, in the secondary with Eric Weddle, he's always been somewhat of a ball magnet in terms of interceptions and pass breakups. So they've got guys at every level that are veterans that can definitely show the younger guys how to get that done.
They got the best special teams in the sport. I mean, Cook's pinning the Browns back to the 5-yard line on a cold. It wasn't windy, but it was definitely, there was a little swirl going on. There always is in Cleveland, as you know, as a former resident there, Phil. But and then you got Tucker who can kick a 60-yard field goal. I mean, that is a very, very nice sort of luxury to have in thinking you're going to be in those kinds of games, either in Jacksonville, Nashville, Kansas City, wherever they would play 2 weeks from now. That's a little weapon to have, as well as a quarterback that isn't going to go knees buckling into any situation, because there's no situation he hasn't excelled at once the weather gets bad and the chips get down and you go on the road as a 10-point underdog, which they'll undoubtedly do.
Well, Nestor, as you know, most of the time these teams take on the personality of their head coach. And with John Harbaugh's background in special teams, and Jerry Rossberg being there, it's no surprise that you could argue that the combination of Cook and Tucker would be the MVPs of the Baltimore Ravens for the better part of the last 3 or 4 years, because it is a weapon for them. Cook's ability to flip the field and then pin opponents back, and then of course with Tucker, he's almost automatic within 50 yards. So that helps the offense. And, in a playoff environment, if it's a nip-and-tuck kind of game, turnovers, special teams, and a veteran quarterback, that could be the winning combination for Baltimore, although I'm still not convinced that, just within the offensive line, the run game, I'm just not 100% sold that, that's going to be good enough to carry him the distance.
He is Senior Bowl Phil out on Twitter, and our lifer pal, Phil Savage, running the Reese's Senior Bowl down there in Mobile next month. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Costas Inn. Good enough for the Today Show and my mom. I'm getting over there for the holidays, getting some crabs this week. Fat crabs, cold beer. The legend continues at Costas Inn. Also, our friends Lee Tessier and his team at Keller Williams American Premier Realty. List your house with Lee, and you risk nothing. His team's going to get your house sold. Lee Tessier. That's TESSIER.com. Phil Savage remembers those nights of crabs and crab cakes and draft talks and all that good stuff. I want to turn this backwards because, Phil, I woke up in Cleveland, Ohio on Sunday morning and Monday morning this week. There were 13,000 people at the game. The team's now 0-14. Obviously, you spent a few days there as well, before, during, after, all the things that have happened there over 20 years, and Jimmy Haslam and all the problems they have. It really is an incredible story here, 25 years in, that you began your career there. You were part of the Berea hold-in and all the stuff that happened when the teams moved. We got a team. Cleveland got a team. They got a stadium. We got a stadium. The Colts went on to draft Peyton Manning and build their own thing there. And Jacksonville giving games away now and playing them over in London. Charlotte, now we have the ownership there. They're going to sell their the franchise there, and I know their seats are blue because they've had so many of them. Yet here in Baltimore, it's incredible, Phil. 22 years, and we've really never had an empty seat. I mean, and one of the real benefits here, that when you travel around and you see football where you see it, there aren't a whole lot of stadia left where third down means trouble for the visiting quarterback in being heard, in offensive linemen jumping, in all sorts of whistle and cadence issues down on a loud field. That was a benefit that we had here in Baltimore that it's eerie, Phil. It's like gone, like all the Ray dance and the third down and the chain gang and all of that intimidation is kind of gone. And I think that's the weird part, that you see Cleveland and you think, who would get out of bed to come and see an 0-14 football team 17, 18 years into this thing? And it's so hard to win once or twice or for a little while. And for all these teams, Phil, the Dolphins and the Bills, and the Jets having to deal with the Patriots every year. I think to some degree, Jacksonville, Houston, and Nashville, where the Colts' dominance for 15 years is so daunting to these other franchises, and it's so hard to get it together, and it's so hard to do it once, that the Ravens have done it for 22 years is really kind of an incredible thing.
Yeah, and won a couple Super Bowls along the way. So it's it's a competitive league, and you mentioned Cleveland and the situation over there. I mean, it's you think that they found bottom, and they continue to not be able to seem like they can find the bottom to push off and get things going again. My last season there was 2008. Of course, we won 10 games in 2007, and they haven't come close to even having a winning record. 1 year under Mike Pettin, it just seems to go backwards 2 steps and forward 1 step. But with John Dorsey going in there as the general manager, we'll see what happens with the coaching situation at the end of the year. But they do have some assets in place with the number of draft picks and the $100 million worth of cap room that the Browns could conceivably get it turned around in a short term. I told people there, I said, look, as long as Ben Roethlisberger and Joe Flacco are in the division, it's going to be tough for the Browns to compete for first or second place. And, now this many years have passed, and, at least Roethlisberger has hinted at retirement, at least at some point in the near future. I don't know about Joe, and, of course, Cincinnati's taken a step back this year, but it's a quarterback-driven league. The Browns have certainly had their problems trying to identify and then develop one. We'll see if it happens this next spring.
Well, it's amazing. You lead me into a segue to quarterbacks, Phil. We don't even have production meetings, you and I. But, when you talk about quarterbacks, we're playing all backup quarterbacks. And here comes Chuck Pagano, who's going to lose his job in 10 days, right, with a team that never really made it to post, with a quarterback that now his career is in question. But he had that franchise quarterback, and he's looking real smart when they're in AFC championship games and going up to Foxborough early on. And they had some power struggles with the GM and Grigson there as well. But when you don't have your quarterback, Green Bay, Indianapolis, we can just go down the list. Houston, gets that kid, and he's unbelievable. And I think it's an insane story what Minnesota has done now on a third quarterback in Case Keenum, that they may find themselves hosting an NFC championship game and playing a Super Bowl at home with Case Keenum is something I don't think anyone in the league would have believed on sort of a Kurt Warner level. But it's incredible. They've lost 2 quarterbacks and are still in this position.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think they were fortunate to get Case Keenum. I think he's emerged now as maybe the top backup in the league. He's going to get paid like a starter at some point after this season. But Nestor, one thing I'd point out about Keenum is, remember, he was prolific at the University of Houston in a shotgun spread offense. And he's been resilient enough and has persevered enough through the years to bounce around, be on a lot of different teams, experience some different offenses, where he has now gotten enough NFL experience that he's actually transitioned from being the so-called college spread quarterback to a bona fide NFL pocket passer. And most of the time, these guys that come out of the spread in college, they get a very short leash in this day and time. If they don't flash at least something, they're recycled and out of the league very quickly. So I think you have to give a lot of credit to Case Keenum for the fact that, he survived a lot of movement in terms of going from team to team and club to club. He never gave up on himself. But at the same time, I think the Vikings, you give them a degree of credit for recognizing that this is someone that had emerged on the other side as a bona fide NFL passer, rather than just a fluky spread quarterback that threw for a zillion yards in college.
Phil, that never happens, does it, right? Like, once someone is thought of as a backup or a 3, they almost never, ever pan out, Not that they don't get an opportunity. Backup quarterbacks always get an opportunity, and that's one of the ways they stay backup quarterbacks. Can play 3-4 games, don't look so good usually, not really prepared the way you would want them to be, not as talented as Aaron Rodgers or Andrew Luck or Joe Flacco or whomever it would be. But it is very, very rare to have someone go from that mindset of a bounce around 3 or a 2 to becoming someone that's really going to get paid a lot of money and may at some point, be a Super Bowl quarterback. Maybe I'm wrong about Case Keenum, but the next 5 years may look like something good for the next franchise he signs with, and they may decide that they want to keep him in Minnesota. He may win the Super Bowl 7 weeks from now, right?
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often because, again, the league is not a developmental league anymore. And it probably needs to be more than ever before because of the rules in high school and college. Think about this, Nestor. 15, 20 years ago, most of the players would go to college for 4 or 5 years. They would go through 20 practices of spring ball, maybe 40 practices of training camp, and then they would play their games and the practices during the week. At least the Tuesday, Wednesday practices were real football practices. You can contrast that to a young man now who comes out of college after 3 years, only had 15 days of spring ball, 10 of which are in pads, a limited number of contact practices during the summer and training camp, and then essentially about 1 day a week of real practicing during the season. And the playing resume on the field, the fundamentals, the techniques, it's wafer thin compared to the prospect, 15, 20 years ago. So the league has moved away from development and more towards instant success, instant gratification with your draft choices and your free agent signing. And the truth of it is that the guys are getting spun out of the league and not getting a second or third or fourth chance. And it's just a rare thing for a guy like Case Keenum to emerge, especially at this level.
Phil, what'd you think of the play at the goal line with the Steelers and the Patriots? I know you've been getting asked about it everywhere you've been the last couple of days.
Yeah, I haven't paid close attention to it. I was out of town over the weekend. I saw a lot of the replays. I think to the letter of the law of what they're saying a catch is, obviously that the ball did roll out of his hand and onto the ground. Jesse James, I believe, was the tight end involved in the play. The replays and everything that goes with NFL and college football now has made everybody an official. And I think to the naked eye, when the play occurred, you would have probably said that was a catch. But then when you get down to the bird's eye view of it in super slow motion, you see the hand come off, and so it gets waved off and goes the other way. We'll see if it generates some more conversation in the off season. I think that the catch rule is probably the least of some of the issues that face the NFL this coming off season.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I'm addressing that in writing, and you've addressed a lot of things in writing as well. 4th and Goal Every Day is your book. I know you've been signing it lots of places for lots of Bama fans down there. Some thoughts about your book and becoming an author and going around. Your arm hurt from autographing it yet, Phil?
I tell you what, Nestor, I had 60 appearances this fall.
Wow.
So starting in the middle of August when the book was released all the way through the holidays, it's been like having an additional full-time job. We spent a year and a half on it, Ray Glear and I, and yes, 70% of it is focused on Alabama, but I would say the other 30% are focused on some of the experiences I've had over the last 30 years. There's a good bit of Baltimore Raven info in there and old Cleveland Browns before we became the Ravens under Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. So, while the book is somewhat promoted as for the Alabama fan, I would say honestly, I've gotten tweets and texts from people all over the country that are not affiliated with Alabama at all that were fascinated by the read. So it's a good story. It certainly talks about the success that Alabama has had and why that has happened. But for a true football fan, I think they'd really enjoy it.
I remember a younger version of you and a younger version of me gathered all night at a rib joint in Owings Mills with our feet up on the counter, drinking iced tea and talking football for a book.
We're doing the same thing years later, too. We're just not doing it at one of those rib joints.
All right, so is Alabama going to
are
they going to deliver another rib and barbecue parade down there in Tuscaloosa?
Well, they certainly have a chance, Nestor, because they're in the tournament, the Final Four. I think Alabama this year is a bit different going into this playoff because I think they're motivated with a chip on their shoulder, unlike years past. While Vegas has made them a favorite, in their minds, they're the fourth team that barely slipped in with a lot of criticism and people second-guessing whether they belonged or not as a non-conference champ. So they go against a Clemson team that took away something from them that they thought was rightfully theirs a year ago. So I think this is a more motivated Crimson Tide team, and it should be a heck of a matchup. These are two programs that conceivably could be in the playoff next year and the year after that. They're both on stable ground with their coaching staff and their offensive and defensive systems in place. But this will be a different game, a different cast of characters. No more Deshaun Watson. Alabama lost 7 defensive players to the NFL draft, including, of course, Marlon Humphrey to the Ravens. So
he's playing well, by the way.
Different group of players, and yeah, that's what I've heard. I did an interview surrounding Marlon a week or two ago, so that's great news for him. He's always had the potential to do it. It's good to see him live up to some of the billing that he got as the 16th overall choice.
Phil, rest up, man. You got a lot of football to watch here. You got a holiday. You got beautiful children. Tell everybody about your family, because I love when you brag on your family out on social media. Those are my favorite pictures.
Yeah, my wife, Dorothy, and I, we have 2 small children, 6 and 2, and they keep us busy. That's another full-time job that
you waited a long time, man. You had a whole full scouting thing and all that going on before you made babies. So you're you got a lot more years ahead of you. You got to come up with some energy for me, Phil.
Well, I tell you one thing, that was always in the back of my mind, in all honesty, was that I felt like that, in the NFL, it's really hard to mix the two things. There are people that do it very successfully, but I just, I saw a lot of problems with families and the moving around, and
it's a selfish career by its very nature, right? Literally.
Yes, the winning and the losing. Hey, sometimes it's easier to stay at the office and watch tape than deal with the family issues or problems at home. I've seen a lot of coaches and scouts do it that way over the years, unfortunately, and I just felt like I'm very fortunate and blessed to be in a position down here at the Senior Bowl in my hometown with family nearby. And, I can go home at night. I still travel a good bit of the time, stay on that road some, but not to the extent of being with a team in the league. And so it's helped me certainly be more available and be a better father than I would be if I were, full-time in the league. Although there are times where I feel like that, it's nonstop, as you've described, with all these different things going on.
You got to stop writing books and winning national championships and flying to Bristol. I see you everywhere, and I love following you. It's a lot of fun. Senior Bowl Phil, one of our oldest, dearest friends. Thanks for making time. Happy holidays to you and your family. Hope that we get to catch up at some point, maybe after the Senior Bowl before the draft.
Nestor, always, brother. Blessings to you and Jen, and Merry Christmas to you, and hope the Ravens can go on to a couple more wins here and punch that playoff ticket.
Next 35 reunion, we're going to get you back up here, man.
Absolutely. I'll be there.
All right. See you soon. There he goes. Senior Bowl Phil out on Twitter. And, of course, the Reese's Senior Bowl next month down in his hometown of Mobile, Alabama. Fantastic event. Phil had me down there a couple years ago, and it was the year of Aaron Donald, as I remember it, who's turned out to be a pretty fair football player. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm also out in the buy, Toyota.com, Audio Vault throughout the holidays. You can find me out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. I've reached out to so many sort of old school people this week for the holiday, for the Colts, and for my series that I'm writing, The Ghost of Football Past, Present, and Future, out at WNST.net. You'll definitely want to give that a read and throw a note my way through the holiday. Last but never least, breaking news, and they're going to trade Manny Machado. I just know it. And when they do, It's going to come to you first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis will be here from 3 until 5 to talk about them not trading Manny Machado, I'm sure, for the holiday weekend, and talk about Colts and Ravens. And I am talking about the empty seats online, so throw me a note, throw a little time, and I hope you read all that I have to say on such topicality. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Thanks.